Hello, good day everyone. My name is Jerome Onoja and I am the managing editor of Majorwaves Energy Report. I welcome you to this very interesting webinar dubbed Optimizing Local Contents Through Regional Integration in a Post-COVID Africa. Now this conversation has become necessary as we have a new normal where novel coronavirus is ravaging the whole world and has limited international travel. A situation where we cannot welcome expatriates into our countries for fear of the obvious. So how do we get around? How do we keep our economies functional? But we need to look inwards to the built local content capacities and capabilities. Now, you would agree with me also that these built technical capacities are not evenly distributed across Africa. For obvious reasons, we have some regions that are well developed, well advanced than the others. So what are we going to do? It's time to begin to have these discussions on what are the challenges of free movement of skill sets from one part of the continent to the other. So we're considering all sorts of arrangements and instruments as well as agreements to see how best to make this happen. All right, to make this conversation go the best way that you would enjoy it, we have a seasoned moderator who is an expert in the oil and gas space. Her name is Mrs. Winifred Patricia Johansson. She is the Senior Vice President at Quantifor. Ms. Winifred has extensive international, commercial, and technical experience. She is a sales and business development person, also skilled in subsea control umbilicals. She holds a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. She also holds another master's degree in oil and gas management from the famous Robert Gordon's University in Aberdeen. And presently, she is pursuing an extramural doctorate degree in leadership at the University of Bradford, United Kingdom. Ms. Johansson is a Norwegian citizen and lives in Oslo, Norway. Madam Moderator, Ms. Winifred, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome, and welcome everybody. It's quite a good turn up. Thank you for joining us for this very, very important conversation. Again, we are in the middle of a transboundary crisis. We need transboundary solutions and solutions that are well suited for Africa, the Africa of the future, learning from what we know now and the past. I'm very honored to moderate this session with 4 very seasoned panelists, and I'll give you a quick introduction of who we have. I'll start with the lady, Ms. Penina Ahebwa. Penina is the Director of Technical Support Services of the Petroleum Authorities of Uganda. Well-seasoned, well-qualified, competent, confident lady that I'm very pleased to be moderating today. Penny holds a Master of Science in Energy and specializes in oil and gas. And has a background with a Masters of Art in Economic Policy and Planning. So we've got good brains here. She has a long time experience with the petroleum authorities in Uganda, and she will be taking us through the works that the country has put in developing the local content and policies. Next to Penny is Mr. Akintunde Adelana. And many of our oil and gas people will know him. He's the director of the Monitoring and Evaluation Board of the Nigerian Content Development and Management Monitoring Board. Mr. Delana is a seasoned speaker and very experienced gentleman. He is he's a management graduate from the University of Benin and a professional member of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply, SIPS, in the UK. He's highly skilled and a versatile professional with more than 26 experience in supply chain management. So we are really in good hands. He's been on the board since 2011, and he's worked over 20 years in the oil and gas industry in Shell in Nigeria. So I'll be really looking forward to hear what he has to say in this very important crossroad we're in. Next to him is Paul Eardley-Taylor. Paul is, I think, one of the best brains we have in investment financing in oil and gas. He's responsible for Standard Bank's oil and gas sector coverage activities in Southern Africa, running 11 countries across upstream, midstream, downstream, and service clients. He's got more than 22 years of energy, corporate, and investment banking experience, covering the oil and gas power utility sections, and he's been based in Africa for the last 12 years. Very pleased to call you a friend as well. Dr. NJ, thank you very much for being here with us. Again, like the rest of the speakers, he's a very competent, bright mind that we are happy to have with us. He is the founder and CEO of Pan-African Corporate Law Conglomerate, sorry about that, the Centurion Law Group, and is the founder and executive chair of the African Energy Chamber. He's a known author, speaker, and very experienced in the oil and gas sector, and is one of the most recognized figures in African business today. As a global shaker of the economy, one of Forbes' top 10 most influential men in Africa in 2015. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to this session. It's going to be great. I want to kick off the session with a quick question to Penina and Mr. Delana. We are here talking about local content, local participation, and regional development across Africa. And really, could you take us through the developments that you've seen in Uganda and in Nigeria in the last years? We would like to know what opportunities are out there and what we are doing for regional integration across Africa.
Thank you, Winifred. I don't know if I should yield first for the ladies, since we should recognize the ladies first. I want to congratulate my fellow panelists and the organizers of the event today. Would you mind if I go first, or Penina go first?
I think I should go first.
Okay, go ahead, please.
But I need to be allowed to share the screen.
You've been enabled, Penina. Go ahead.
Is it visible?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yes, we see your screen now. Thank you, Penina.
Okay, thank you so much. And I have been introduced already. I must say, before I go into answering the question, as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, we are delighted to be taking part in this dialogue. Indeed, it is one of its kind. We've been talking about national content, but different areas of national content. It is one of its kind, and it is very, very timely. And so as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, we are delighted to take part into this discussion. I will answer the question by looking at introducing you to Uganda, but also the oil and gas sector in Uganda. Then I'll talk you through the state of national content in Uganda's oil and gas sector, and I will share our thinking in terms of the opportunities we see for regional integration with the view of enhancing national content. Just to say, before the epidemic, Uganda was doing very well in terms of its economy, growing at 6.5% in terms of GDP, and its GDP as of last year was around $34 billion. We have an aspiration to move into upper middle income by the end of 2040, and one of the prospective sectors that we are looking at is the oil and gas sector, but mainly focusing on the development phase. So that we may retain as much as we can from the investment that is estimated during the development phase. Just to introduce you briefly to the oil and gas sector in Uganda in terms of how big it is and where we are in terms of licensing. So far we have around 21 oil and gas discoveries. We have an unprecedented drilling success rate of 88%. We have a resource of around 6 billion barrels of oil initially in place, and we estimate that 1.4 billion of that will be recovered. We have issued out so far 9 production licenses, over 14 of those discoveries, mainly to CNOOC, to Total, and to Talo, although Talo is farming out. We have 3 active exploration licenses, and these are mainly to AMA, is a Nigerian company, and Oranto Petroleum of Nigeria. As you can see, we have a transnational participation in our upstream, and so we've already opened up to a regional integration, I would say. And it's also sufficing to say that our most prospective basin, which is the Albertine Graben, only 10% of that basin is actually licensed. 90% still up for grabs, and so there's still so much potential and opportunity in the upstream in Uganda. Again, to take you through in brief the kind of projects that we have, I can summarize them into 2. We have those under exploration, like I have said, but we also have an ongoing licensing round. We have 5 blocks which were launched last year, and the licensing round will be coming to an end by September, on 30th September this year. They are very beautiful blocks. I would encourage our investors out there to take the opportunity. Obviously, it has been affected by this pandemic and the environment in which the industry is going through. But so far, we have seen some turn-ups. We have around 6 or 7 participants already who have expressed interest. The other category of projects are those that are moving into the development phase. They are grouped into 2, Tilenga and Kingfisher. I can't go into much detail because of time, but these are technically ready for FID. All that is holding them are a few commercial issues that we are discussing with the IOCs, and definitely once they're ironed out, we will see FID not long from now. Again, we have another category of projects, which are the monetization projects. We have agreed that we will use some of the crude oil. It will be refined in country to add value, but also to meet the energy needs of the country and the region at large. And actually the refinery project was conceived within the EAC community, the East African community. It was agreed that within the region there was need for establishment of another refinery, and Uganda was identified as an area where the refinery should be built because of proximity to the main discoveries that we have in the region. So our work on the refinery is ongoing, FEED is ongoing, and I think within the next maybe 12 or 24 months, we should be seeing FID for the refinery as well. For the East African crude oil pipeline, it's going to be, I know you've heard, the longest heated pipeline in the world. It is unprecedented. The technical work is done, so it is also technically ready for FID. We only have a few commercial issues here and there, and then we'll see FID. So generally, these are the projects that we have post-COVID. And the estimated capex is 7 to 10 billion within a time span of 3 to 5 years. Having told you the magnitude of the projects that we have, we can now talk about national content, how much we want to retain in the country out of those projects. We first sat back and looked at where we are as a country in terms of capacity. We did a number of studies. One of them was the industry baseline survey, which was done with the oil companies. We also did a skills gap analysis. And out of that, we were able to know where we are or where we were, and we were able to come up with appropriate policy and regulatory frameworks. These are there, so we have a fully fledged regulatory framework to support and develop national content. We have gone ahead to define what we really want out of, this oil and gas sector. And for us, national content really means in-country value creation and retention, while ensuring competitiveness, efficiency, and effectiveness. We have a number of pillars when we talk about national content, quite a number of them, but one of the core pillars is the establishment and building capacity of the National Oil Company, which is the UNOC. That is our number one pillar, but the other pillars are employment of Ugandan citizens, transfer of knowledge and technology, utilization of locally produced goods and services, among others. So in terms of taking forward national content, these are the key pillars or focus areas we have as a country in the oil and gas sector. Like I said, we sat back, we looked at where we were, we put up a regulatory framework that will take us where we want to be. I'll just highlight a few things that we have in the regulatory framework to support national content development. Under supply-based development or utilization of Ugandan goods and services, we have a reserve scheme where a category of 16 goods and services are ring-fenced to be provided exclusively by Ugandan companies. And by Ugandan companies, if you go into our law, it is really encompassing. Even if you're a foreigner, you can actually come, set up in the country, register. Even if you're owned by foreigners, you come in, you incorporate in the country, you utilize the goods and services in the country, and then you qualify to be a Ugandan. And you will be entitled to the reserve scheme. So even in that definition of Ugandan, we are embracing, participants from other regions. We have a providence for joint ventures. We admit we cannot do it all. We need capacity to be built in areas of technical and finance. And so we are looking out for regional cooperation to build capacity in technical aspects and even financially. We have also provided for the National Content Fund and domiciliation, but also tools that will enhance visibility of our people. And even if you're not a Ugandan, you can actually register on the National Supplier Database, and it is actually a requirement, and you can easily participate in the industry. We also have a process for foreigners working in the country. We are not really closed out to foreigners working in the country, but we have a process. You will go through a work permit process, and it also embraces regional integration. If I had time, I would go in detail, but it also embraces regional integration. And so those are some of the key aspects we have in the regulatory framework, but I must say the regulatory framework embraces regional integration because we believe it is the way to go. It is the quickest way to build our capacity, technically, financially, among others. In terms of Where we stand now, briefly, as you can see, in terms of value that has been retained in the country, the trend is on the rise. But we are saying, yes, the trend is on the rise. We still have areas where we don't have capacity, and for those areas, we will be looking out for regional cooperation to leverage on the technical and the financial capacity that is out there within the region. We see ourselves as an upcoming skills development hub. We have the Oil and Gas Trainers Association, which looks out for the quality of people that are being channeled out. And so far, we have trained over 4,000 people that are internationally certified for the different skills that are required. We are also focusing on domiciling international certification within the country. And so far, I think we have centers for city and guilds, OPITO, ECTIB, among others. We also have very well-equipped vocational training institutes, and our very own, the Uganda Petroleum Institute of Kibumba, which is dedicated to producing the technicians that are going to be required during both the development and the production phase. So we look at ourselves as an upcoming skills hub, maybe for the region, or even, you never know, beyond the region. This is just to display how equipped our institutions are. In terms of, I think this is the main slide everyone should be looking out for. In terms of the opportunities that we think are up there for grabs or through regional integration, and at the end of the day, enhancing national content. We see a lot of opportunity in the projects that we have, like I explained, in the upstream, field development, the ECOP and the refinery, but mainly through joint ventures. And I have put this circle here just to say the areas where we expect joint ventures to come from. For the areas in the outer circle, those are mainly the ones that have been ring-fenced for Ugandan companies. But we must admit that for the areas that are in the inner two circles, we are still lacking in one or another, and joint ventures would enhance our capacity development. We have opportunities, I think, for partnership with the Ugandan oil company, UNOC. Like I said, we are running a licensing ground. It's an opportunity for operators that have built capacity within Africa to come in and take the opportunity. We are seeing opportunities in Mozambique, the Mozambique LNG, where FID was recently taken. We have started talks as far as this is concerned, because yes, in Uganda, people may say FID has delayed a bit, but we have built capacity relatively if you look around. And so can we be using that capacity in some of the ongoing projects like Mozambique, like South Sudan? And so discussions have started. They're in the very, very initial stages, but we believe this needs to be given time and attention. There's also an opportunity in terms of leveraging the different tools that have been developed across the regions, including the NOCTIA, or the National Oil and Gas Talent Register of Uganda, the National Supplier Database. Most of these systems are already out there, for example, in Nigeria, well developed. It would be an opportunity to maybe collaborate and partner and see how we can make them maybe regional tools and so on. There are opportunities of establishing regional hubs, like I said, for skills development. Like I said, in Uganda, we are an upcoming one, but we can leverage on Nigeria. I think it is one of the good hubs for skills development that we have in Africa, and so many other opportunities. So in conclusion, I must say we appreciate that, yes, we can ring fence a few things here and there for our enterprises, but we need to admit that in some areas, we need to enhance our capacity, and one of the ways is through embracing regional integration and embracing regional cooperation in those areas where we are lacking, so that we can leverage on the capacity that is already built within the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Penina. Highly appreciated. Short summary, I can tell you from the number of participants that there's a lot of interest for the discussions we are having now. And I've had a scroll through the countries that are represented. I think I have identified 10 or more countries now, and looking at the profiles, cuts across the industry. This is no longer just about oil and gas. It's about regional integration across the silos, across industry, across trade, across education, across sector. And it was about time we started this conversation. My take from your presentation: Uganda is open for regional cooperation, and we hope the rest of Africa is listening and ready to support, ready to come in, or to support the capacity that's been developed that needs to integrate. There is no reason to be dormant with skills that are developed. Where they're needed, there should be free flow of capital and people. With this, the floor is yours, Mr. Delana. Can you take us through the Nigerian story, where we are now, where we need to be post-COVID, and what opportunities are out there?
Thank you, Winifred. I'll just go on and allow my slide to come on as I start the presentation. I've been introduced already, so I don't need to go through that. We are all very familiar with Nigeria as an oil and gas producing country. We are old in the oil and gas business with over 60 years experience, having struck the first oil in commercial quantity about 1956. Currently, Nigeria has a reserve of close to 40 billion barrels. And then our position globally is about 11th. And then in terms of production, we're about 13th, and we're a prominent member of OPEC. Daily production at the moment is about 1.9, even though we have, recently there's been some cuts as agreed by OPEC. With respect to gas, we had a lot of gas reserve, well over close to 200 trillion cubic feet. So mandate is to develop local capacities and capabilities and monitor compliance and enforce the provisions of the law. We started that journey in 2010. At that time, based on our survey and calculation, the amount of spend retained in country was less than 5%. That is, participation of locals and local entrepreneurs in the oil and gas business in Nigeria was less than 5%. But as of 2017, we have been able to ramp that up to 26%. And in 2017, we sat together as a board, took a look at the journey from 2010, the 7 years journey, and then coming together as a team. We put all the brains together. We had consultants working with us. We decided that we will be able to achieve 70% by the year 2027. We created that roadmap towards 2027. We look at the entire value chain of the oil and gas industry, from the upstream, midstream, downstream, and of course, we also thought about extending the values to the sector, to the other sectors of the economy. This was actually built on the 5 pillars and the 4 enablers, basically. But our target was to achieve 70% retention, spend retention in country. We targeted creation of 300,000 jobs, retaining 14 billion out of an estimated $20 billion of spend in country. We also deliberately, consciously agreed that shipyards need to be established in country, viable shipyards to support the huge maritime industry in Nigeria. This was based on proper gap analysis, just exactly what Uganda did. And we also realized also that manufacturing is also very key. So we set our minds to ensuring that we improve manufacturing capabilities in country. Next slide. This will involve implementation of major projects in country to continue to close the gaps, the capacity and capability gaps in country. It will also involve many initiatives around capacity development, project-based training on the back of all manners of projects. Recently, we just concluded the huge Egina project, which I'm going to talk about later on in the presentation. And then, of course, we want to continue to focus on taking FIDs on many other projects. We just did one recently, despite the COVID lockdown. We took FID for the LNG Train 7 in Nigeria, which is going to be a huge project that will involve a spend of close to $6 billion. Egina is one key project which I want to talk about. Egina is a project sponsored by Total. Next slide, please. And it has a high impact with respect to capacity building in country. Some of the achievements on the back of Egina was that we're able to employ 24 million man-hours, which translates to about 3,000 persons working on an average for 5 years. That was huge. Egina is a vessel with a capacity of over 250,000 barrels of crude for storage and production. It's an offshore vessel and has a length of over 300 meters. Training on the back of this project was about 560,000 man-hours of human capacity development. These are Nigerians that were trained in skills that are relevant to the oil and gas industry. It involved the development of infrastructures, tangible infrastructures to support Egina at that point, and also support the oil and gas industry in Nigeria on a perpetual basis. It involved the building of a yard for fabrication, and also it involved the building of a quayside with a length of over 500 meters. Production capacity, like I said, is about 200,000, between 200,000 and 250,000 barrels of crude per day. And it involved a lot of skills transfer on the job. The project lasted for well over 6 years, and we were fully involved from the point where that project was conceptualized to the point where it was eventually delivered about a couple of years ago. Some of the questions that will ponder our mind at this point is, one, what if Egina was executed without local content? You can imagine the values that would have been lost to Nigeria and by extension, Africa. What would have been the fate of Nigerians, over 3,000 Nigerians who were fully and gainfully employed for 5 years? What would have been the fate of these Nigerians within that period? That's just questions that were easily answered through that project, Egina. We had other initiatives. The No Gaps, which is a Nigerian oil and gas tax scheme, which we developed towards setting up a kind of manufacturing hub in basically all the oil and gas producing states in the country. The idea is to create these hubs around areas where we have amenities that supports the oil and gas industry. Such amenities can then be shared, and then eventually we have a reduced cost with respect to oil and gas production, which is also very key. It's one thing that I'm going to also touch on very, very briefly. Currently, we've kicked off 2 of those projects, and those are the projects you see in pictures. We also have a 25 megawatts in power plant to support this, particularly for the one in Bayelsa. The gas plant is already up and running. However, the park is under construction, as you can see. We hope to deliver this in the next 24 months. We also have another one at Udupani, which is another state in Nigeria, Cross River State, and is fully under construction. Next slide, please. What we're doing again is in respect to R&D. R&D, you will agree with me, is a bedrock of development in any environment. We need to continue to evolve. We need to continue to create values. And R&D is very key on this. And I think this is one of the opportunities that Africa, as a continent, need to take on post-COVID. Is also very key, because we need to begin to look back into our resource base. Africa is a very rich country, very rich continent rather. And we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of minerals everywhere in Africa. All we need to do is to look back, look at other ways, think also out of the box to devise means of utilizing these facilities. In Nigeria, we already have an R&D framework, which we've already rolled out. We have inaugurated an R&D council and established an R&D fund with a limit, an initial fund of about $50 million to support R&D. On an annual basis, we organize an R&D fair where we encourage individuals to come showcase their R&D achievements. And some of them, we support them to push this to a level where we can commercialize the R&D ideas. Yeah, I will very quickly take you through some of the pictures and some of our achievements over the past 10 years. You can see from the slide here, over 8 million training man hours involving over 7,000 trainees on the back of projects have been achieved within this time frame. Currently today, we have over 420 metric tons of production of pipe mill in country. One is based in Abuja, in the central of Nigeria, and then one is in Lagos, very, very close to the commercial hub of Nigeria. And they are world class, producing pipes already. And at the same time, we have about 3 others who are in the process of setting up the pipe mills. The Nordic JQS is a system which we have developed and we utilize as a solution to manage and interact with the oil and gas industry. Currently, we have over 170,000 individuals who have already registered on this platform. Over 8,000 service companies are also registered here, 62 operators. This is available to any company, any individual, or any service companies anywhere in Africa or in the world. We also encourage Nigerians who are in diaspora to also register on this so that they can take advantage of some of the opportunities available in country. 40% of marine vessels are currently owned by Nigerians and they support the oil and gas industry. Before the NOGIC Act, this was well below 3%. But as of today, we can confidently say that Nigerians are playing in this environment. We have Nigerians who own acreages. We have Nigerian companies who are already involved in exploration and production activities in Nigeria. Examples are the Seplat, the ITO, the Aerotons of this world. And again, currently, Nigeria has also opened up, we just announced a new bid round of about 46 licenses. And this is also another very great opportunity where Nigerians or anyone from Africa can come around to play. We have capacities in all this area. We have capacities in engineering design. We have massive fabrication capacity. We have massive deposits of barytes in Nigeria, and we have recently ramped up our mining capability. We've mechanized our mining capability with respect to barytes, which is a good resource for supporting oil and gas industry. With respect to low and high voltage cables, we have companies in Nigeria who are already manufacturing that, and recently they have converted their production capacity to support the oil and gas. There are huge contributions coming from indigenous producers. As you can see, it's growing gradually from 3, 8, 15%. And we'll continue to ramp this up to a point where we hope that African and Nigerians can confidently play in this environment. Funding is one key element of any business. It's the soul of any business. And we recognize this. The Nigerian Content, the Nordic Act actually made provision for a Nigerian Content Development Fund, which is growing to support development of local content in Nigeria. We have set aside 200 million, and we'll tag that the Nigerian Content Intervention Fund with one of the banks in Nigeria, the Bank of Industry. And this is to support Nigerian entrepreneurs with respect to business, with respect to manufacturing, and with respect to any of the ideas that might come up. Paints, we manufacture paints in Nigeria to support, as a matter of fact, paints from Nigeria was used on the Aegina. And I am quite aware that the paints manufacturers in Nigeria are already going beyond the Nigerian environment to sell the products from Nigeria to other parts of Africa. Pipe coating is key. I have mentioned that as more like an extension of the pipe mills. We currently have 6 pipe coating plants, and they are world class and in a position to support the oil and gas industry in any environment. The next slide is talking about how we have actually set ourselves to achieve the 70%. Like I said earlier, we identified the 5 pillars and the 4 enablers. 5 pillars are the technical capability development, compliance and enforcement, organization capability, enabling business environment, and sectorial and regional linkages. And as you can see, under each of these pillars, we have identified what we have done within that period. And then the enablers are the funding, the regulatory environment, stakeholders engagement, and then research and statistics. I think for one of time, I won't dwell so much on that. But right under each of these boxes, you can see what we have done over time. From here, I'm going to show you pictures and just talk through them of some of the things that we have done practically. These are pictures, Cameroon valves for valves assembly in Nigeria. OES Respect is a swamp rig that is owned by a Nigerian and supports oil and gas activity in Nigeria. FMC subsea assembly plant, that's also in Nigeria, where subsea trees are assembled. As a matter of fact, 23 subsea trees were assembled at this plant to support the Aegina project. We have the Total Premier facility where pipes are threaded for support to support the oil and gas industry. We have machine shops, we have fabrication yards, the EWT, we have Avion, which is also another fabrication yard, the simulation center for PEM offshore, and then that's the SCC pipe mill in Abuja. Next slide, please. Just going to show you more pictures. That is the Lador yard where you have the She MCI fabrication yard where integration of the Aegina FPSO was actually carried out. This was a landmark achievement. This is one of the biggest FPSO all over the world, and this was integrated in Nigeria. So today, we can confidently say that FPSOs can be integrated in Africa. I know South Africa have capabilities for that. Nigeria is also has the capability for that. So there's no reason whatsoever, Penina, there's no reason whatsoever for you to look out to Europe or to any other place. Africa has got it. MV Africa Vision is one of the pipeline vessels owned by a Nigerian. It's available. Petrolog is another vessel. And of course, the Niger Dockyard is a fab yard which has a huge capacity and it's been around for a while. Next slide, please. Just very quickly go through the pictures. Yeah, these are some of the work and the jobs that have been done in Nigeria. Next slide, please. Next one is showing you an area view of the Lador Fabrication Yard with the CFCI, where the original PSO was integrated. The next you'll see will be our 17-story building, which we just completed, and we're about moving into it in Bayelsa State. It's an edifice that you can behold. That's about that. I will just wait for questions. Thank you very much, Penina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Delana, for that in-depth presentation. Questions are coming in. Because we are running out of time, we'll keep this short and we'll give a summary at the end of this. Now, the next speaker is Mr. Paul Taylor. Lots of questions coming up on Mozambique. Everybody wants to know, is Mozambique open for business? So tell us, what's the story? What's happening?
Yeah, thank you, Winifred. I'm just going to talk without slides about the Mozambican local content situation, leading with the LNG project. LNG is more or less unique in the global oil and gas industry because it's extremely large. In the case of Mozambique, so far there's at least 2 projects that are larger than the country itself in terms of GDP. So the approach in Mozambique has been a little bit different so far. But it's not to say it's ineffective. It looks a fairly sensible approach. So local content, the baseline in Mozambique is you have a lot of the taxations that you have around the world. You have royalties, you have profit gas, you have income tax and so on. You also have a state oil and gas company. In Mozambique, it's called ENH and has been going since the 1980s. The approach, though, that's been taken in Mozambique for local content is bilateral negotiations around each deal's plan of development. So LNG deals, as I mentioned, are extremely large and they have an individual plan of development that's agreed with the government to do the project. And within those plans of development, so far there have been 3 different local content schemes negotiated. The first one, floating LNG for Coral, is a ship primarily built offshore, very small by subsequent standards, local content for obvious reasons. The second project, Mozambique LNG, round about a $2 billion new money commitment to local content. That is extremely strong in a country which has a GDP only of about $15 billion. The third project is Rovuma LNG, larger still, that has a $3 billion local content commitment. We often hear about the concept of escalators in local content. Through the approach that Mozambique has selected, you automatically have a local content escalator because the subsequent plans of development will have their own local content provisions negotiated. And the assumption is that more local content will be available and deliverable for later projects than there are for the early projects. So what does local content mean in practice in Mozambique? So a Mozambican company is allowed to charge an extra 10% in terms of pricing for goods of the same quality and time frame. So it's the standard World Bank provisions. In line with some of the provisions mentioned elsewhere, a Mozambican company is one that is simply set up in Mozambique and pays tax in Mozambique. For the LNG purposes, it does not have to be owned at this stage by a Mozambican citizen. So this is the approach that has been followed so far. The main drawback, or really the observation so far, is it doesn't cover the whole economy. It covers LNG. So in respect of a domestic gas project, for example, gas to liquids project using the gas from the LNG, or a fertilizer project, as it stands, there are no local content provisions. That would be one example. Or, for example, if you decide to build a factory to supply the increasing consumer wealth of Mozambique, that also doesn't have local content provisions. So what's been discussed over the last year or so is whether Mozambique needs a local content law for the sectors that are not LNG related. And there's been a reasonable amount of discussion in Parliament as to whether that is workable or not. From our perspective, we are very satisfied and excited by the local content opportunity in Mozambique, which across those two deals I mentioned is about $5 billion over the next 4 to 5 years alone. So I'll pause it there.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this summary. Now, the focus of this discussion is regional integration post-COVID. And here I'm really keen to hear what you have to say, Dr. NJ, on the role that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement plays in this. How are we opening up Africa for these opportunities that are available? How are we breaking down the silos?
Thank you so much for having me. I think the Africa Free Trade Act, it was a great opportunity and also a missed opportunity for the oil and gas sector and energy as a whole to fully participate and integrate energy experts on what we do. I am very happy to be part of these discussions, and I think a big part of what we do as somebody who's worked a lot on deals and transactions around the continent and also with the African Energy Chamber is that we tend to really have a lot of discussions about our country. Very happy to look at what Penina had to say with Uganda, bringing in skills from outside and also looking at compensating the delay in starting first oil with Total and CNOOC right now, sending skills, looking at sending skills abroad. And yes, it is no question Nigeria's long history in the industry. And I think most of Africa has been shaped by that. The Africa Free Trade Act still stands at a pivotal point to play that role to cause full integration of our industry when it comes to looking at regulations. The truth about it is that we've not really done a lot to really harmonize laws and really try and move to say, let's look at more on the regional content, Africa content.
Mm-hmm.
What we see today around any countries without laws or regulations, what you have is you have local content laws in Nigeria, Mozambique, or Uganda, or Equatorial Guinea, or anywhere else. It only talks about nationals. So you've seen a shell game where local service producers are not even given a chance, or regional players are not given a chance to really play. And this is something which I've been very critical about the AU about it, and don't really have a lot of friends there, but that's okay. But one of the things which we look at, we say, take a country like Nigeria. Nigeria has built some of the best service companies in the region. A lot of Nigerians have gone out, and if you look at whether you look at Shell, you look at Exxon, you look at Schlumberger, you look at Baker Hughes, Halliburton, you wouldn't walk in without seeing Nigerians either at the global on the global side, a regional, or any kind of job markets that walk in. But now within Africa, you're saying we are going to move goods and services, but we can't move people. You can't really work on whether you're going to have visas to travel. You can't really work on saying, for example, if I bid for a project in Gabon or in Congo or in Equatorial Guinea, if you don't have a local company that gets it, and for the most part, they have been doing oil for a very shorter period of time than a country like Nigeria. You go immediately to China, Philippines, Aberdeen, and Dundee, and Houston. So you put African companies and African service companies at a disadvantage to take on doing services within Africa where they can still bring the international partners, but then you still having a lot of that money, which Tunde said, stay within Africa and circulate within and really rebuild economics. I think the Africa Free Trade Act missed that opportunity, and I think that has to be addressed. And I think Nigeria should actually take leadership in this, given that it is a country that has built around that. And I'll give you an example before I let you with this. A few years back, there was an $800 million project being done in Equatorial Guinea. I was lead counsel on that, really pushed to have a Nigerian company. I think the name was Delta Africa. They got in, they did that, they got in, they won the tender, but it was a tough fight. It was just tough, because they didn't represent what the IOCs want to see. They didn't fit the mold. But after we had some kind of push and they got the job, guess what? They won an award. They did the project on the time. They did it so excellent that the IOCs collectively gave them an award for doing that. This was a project done by Nigerian engineers supporting a US oil company in a foreign country, and they executed admirably. If they can do that, why can't we have things like the Africa Trade Act include things like that to encourage this kind of skill transfer? People like me weren't born to be in oil and gas. I was born in a little rural village, and for some reason I end up in this industry, and that's why, heck, I don't care. I just do it and I make as much money as I can make. But let's be honest with where we are in this industry. If we don't create those opportunities for people like me, we're born in small towns, then we have a problem. Because at the end of the day, when you walk in that room, when you look at building a business and you look at somebody who grew up in the places that you grew up in, women and everything that are Africans, and when they get in there and you see them and you say, well, if they can make it, I can make it. I have a future. The color of success doesn't have to come from China, Aberdeen, Houston. They are part of that success, but we have to be stewards to drive that success with our people to say it's possible. I stopped.
Well, I was hoping you would continue, and I fully agree with you. We need opportunity. Lots of questions coming in, and I'm really, really pleased to see that everybody attending is really engaged, and we are touching on some very important points for everybody. Now, we'll start, and this is coming, lots of questions on this. Penina, people want to know what the challenges are for implementation of local content in Uganda, and particularly in relation to the transnational oil and gas infrastructure. So can you take us on what it's like from the regional perspective of a project like this?
Okay, thank you so much once again, and I thank the audience that is sending through those questions. The industry is nascent in Uganda. It's only a few years old. It's not like in Nigeria, where it is so many years old and they have been into production for such a long time. We haven't really experienced production, I would say. All we have been able to achieve in terms of, witnessing production is extended well testing. So first of all, in terms of implementing national content, one of the challenges, like I kept saying in my presentation, we will admit there is still limited capacity. It is only a few services. Yes, we have advanced. If you look at our other regional sister countries, we have advanced in a number of services, but we will admit for the high value services, we still lack capacity. And we have the mechanisms to build that capacity. And like I said, one of them is to embrace regional cooperation through joint ventures where we are not able to. So we have been able to execute low-level, low-value contracts, but we would love to go in for the high-value contracts, but because of limited capacity, limited exposure, because the industry hasn't really moved into execution of the development phase, so there is a limitation somewhere. But like I said, regional cooperation or joint ventures is something that we are welcome to doing for the sake of building our technical and financial muscles. Now going to the transnational infrastructure that we have, as far as, well, I'll talk about how it has impacted integration or regional integration. The transnational infrastructure we are talking about is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, in short, which is known as the EACOP, which I said is the longest heated pipeline that the world has ever seen or will ever see, I should say. First of all, within East Africa, we had progressed, or we have progressed in terms of integration as a community, the East African community. In there, we have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. It has progressed, and so we expect this transnational infrastructure to impact that integration more positively. And one of the things I want to look at is, like I said, we have been mainly in the preparatory stage. We went into a long process of selecting the route between Kenya and Tanzania. It wasn't that short. If we had been maybe aligned much earlier in terms of priorities, in terms of development strategies at ESC level, maybe the time we took to choose the route wouldn't have been that long. But well, good enough, we chose the route. Some of the opportunities we see coming with this infrastructure in terms of deepening integration, one, like you will appreciate industry-wise, the practice is that if you're to efficiently monitor or regulate or execute such a transnational infrastructure, you should have a harmonized or a uniform regime. So what we are doing right now is to harmonize or uniform the policy and the legal frameworks. You'll appreciate with me, for example, issues on environment. You cannot afford to have different standards in Uganda, in Tanzania, applying on the same pipeline. So there is an opportunity to harmonize on the policy and legal framework, but also on the fiscal regime. I don't know if you followed in the media, the project was well welcomed by Tanzania, and they gave us very attractive fiscal incentives for the project because they foresaw it is coming with a lot of opportunities. And so they started with the fiscal incentives, and as Uganda, we also had to match that. So there has also been some harmonization in terms of the fiscal regime. But I must say now this is coming at a project by project, or case by case basis. But if it could be done or generally or centrally to cover any other future project that would come between the two countries, I think it would be much easier. So one of the opportunities I see with this transnational infrastructure is deepening integration within the region, but also I think it is awakening the two sister states or the ESC itself that things will come, but it's better they come when we have reached some good level of integration or cooperation. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, the next question I have is for Mr. Adelana. We are all wondering what are the opportunities that are available in Nigeria post-COVID, looking at marginal fields, the bidding round started, and there are also questions about how to promote skill transfers across the region, to mitigate brain drain from other parts of Africa that are not currently in activity and could perhaps engage in Nigeria without putting in roadblocks. What's your take on that, sir?
Thank you so much, Winifred. I'll start by saying that we have abundant skills. We have abundant capabilities and competencies in Nigeria, given the length of time, over 60 years that we've been in this industry. And I think my friend Paul mentioned during his presentation, I guess it was Paul, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned during his presentation that everywhere you look, you meet Nigerians. Nigerians they've been involved in oil and gas with most multinationals, operators and service companies, the Halliburtons of this world, the Schlumbergers of this world, the Shell, the Chevron, and so on and so forth. Nigerians have been there. And most of these Nigerians are now, some are retired, mostly retired, and are now running businesses on their own. They are now putting those skills, those lessons learned, those competencies gained during their time with those companies. They are putting those into use. They are setting up businesses in Nigeria. They are delivering quality in Nigeria. Quality with respect to safety, with respect to time, with respect to within budget. That has been confirmed by Dr. NJ with the Data Africa example. We know Data Africa very well in Nigeria, and we know them to be a credible company. These are abundant opportunities, I must say. For the rest of Africa, Nigerians have the skills, we have the infrastructure, we have the ability to deliver in any other part of Africa. Again, most importantly for other African countries, there's a lot you can learn from Nigerians. There's a lot you can learn from Nigeria. Why you want to, while we talk about skills transfer, Nigerians are very good teachers too. So let's look at that. That's the first opportunity I want to put on the table. The second opportunity that I would say, R&D is key. I doubt if, apart from South Africa, there are very few African countries who really take R&D seriously. Nigeria is beginning to think about that. And even when you look at South Africa, the percentage of fund committed to R&D in South Africa is still very low compared to other parts of the world. R&D is a bedrock of growth and development. That's another opportunity. We can look. Our people need to begin to look back and then do some more research into our local resources to see how those can be utilized to support the oil and gas industry. Not just the oil and gas industry, I think the entire economy at large. Talking about brain drain, I just mentioned that. At first, if you have issue or you have challenges with skills, you need to learn. You need to learn from someone who already know. Nigeria already know. So first, I think there could be a collaboration between African countries where you can send your interns to Nigeria. They can work with Nigerians either on the, because we in Nigeria, our principle, the principle we like to push with respect to local content is that local content is not about indigenization. It is about domiciliation and domestication. And what does that mean? It means bring it to us, do it here. Our people will learn from it. They pick up skills from it, and then gradually they can ramp up their skills until they become experts in that field. I think that's what Nigeria has done in a way. And what we have also done with the law was to put a structure behind this. And then what we do at NCDMB is to monitor this. It's the right way to go. So for every African country, you can also do the same. But see Nigeria as a place where you can actually tap and acquire those skills and competencies. Either you work with a Nigerian company who would deliver those projects or those deliverables within the African country environment, with understudies from those African countries, and with time, of course, you acquire the relevant skills. Yeah, that's. Let me stop there for now.
Okay. Yes. In the interest of time, Margaret, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I would like that very question. If any member of the panelists can also say something about it. It seems like that is part of what our audience are very interested in. What are the opportunities available in Africa post COVID-19? I mean, like going forward, what people want to know, what can I do at this point in time when the world is like on a standstill regarding projects and all that? So any of the panelists can maybe.
I think I want to direct this to Paul as well, because the post-COVID climate is coming with cost challenges. So what funds are available and what can we do with what is available to maximize the opportunities and open up the integration?
Yeah, thanks, Winifred. I'll talk about the Mozambican context. So Mozambique is in a situation at the moment which is reasonably unique in COVID, almost globally, which is the financing of the first onshore project has been largely unaffected by COVID and is on track to sign within the next few days, raising approximately $15 billion in a country that's worth $15 billion. So to really sort of emphasize the local content opportunity, it's roughly about $5 billion over 4 to 5 years. What does that mean? How can my company get involved? Those are the obvious questions we know get asked. So really talking about two things. One thing Standard Bank's done a lot of work on over the last few months, and obviously it's only going to accelerate in the future, is local content supply chain financing. In the context of LNG so far on the project, pretty much everything has been a joint venture between a local entity in Mozambique or an international company with an established Mozambican presence and an offshore entity. So the ability to fund the local partner based on contracts with either the project itself or the contractors or the subcontractors to the project is really key. And that's something we're looking at very closely. Where will it go? I think the next phase for a lot of the local companies is equity funded joint ventures. These will look a little bit like Black Empowerment in South Africa, where banks will lend money to the local entrepreneurs to buy shares in the joint ventures. And then over time, they will become the established local corporates in Mozambique, which have the skills and the track record of the companies in Nigeria that have been mentioned already. And then just the last point where we're also spending a lot of time on is something called the incubator. This is all about small and medium-sized enterprise development in Mozambique, where the intention is very much to matchmake, to team, to partner the local developing corporates owned by Mozambicans with the international companies who are coming into Mozambique. So we're not under any illusions, it's going to take time. Even a company such as the Wood Group, was formed as recently as 1982 after activity in the 70s. So it's very much a 10, 15, 20-year process to develop really substantial domestic Mozambican corporates. But we are confident that through lending money to joint ventures and then through the incubator, this can be achieved over time.
Are these funds available to companies outside Mozambique?
Well, for a project in Mozambique, local content is all about the activities taking place in Mozambique. The overarching project financing facility covers those types of facilities. So, for example, the trains themselves, the condensers, all of those, the steel, they've been funded by the project finance facility. So it's really about the local content surrounding the project.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I want to come back to you, Dr. NJ. What are the key challenges you are seeing on regional cooperation? What are the main roadblocks? Are there any simple tweaks we can do within the capacity of the frameworks that we have to crank it up and get things going?
Well, I'm going to say this in twofold. One, on the transactions, and I think a little bit of what Paul had to say on Mozambique. Integration without preparation, it will only lead you to frustration. You have to look at where we stand right now around the continent, looking at opportunities. One, you got to put skin in the game. You got to try to see how you create these institutions, whether it is training, development, and you actually fund them with the right strategy. Every African oil producing state that I do work in, they have these big institutes of training that are not functioning. So it might sound a little bit controversial. You have to shut some of them down and use those that are working and coalesce around it and boost Africa. And I think when you do that with what Penina brought to the table, that's right, when government is driving all of this. But I come from the private sector, and I think government should enable private sector to drive this. Because when the private sector does drive things, they do it better. And that's not what government does. But in some states, yes, we have to accept that government has to drive it, but I'll try to give more credence to the African private sector, and you look at that. And let's be honest, looking around the continent, where skills are missing, where you don't have skills, look at the huge pool of the African diaspora and try to bring them in and let them help you. You know, Paul was talking about Mozambique and opportunities, and the same thing I've seen in Equatorial Guinea, in Angola, and everything with saying, looking at a BEE format of trying to say you provide financing. A big part of what we find ourselves post-COVID is that we don't have money. And going forward, that you would have to have capital, but not just capital, but then patient capital. That is patient and works with you. But if you're going to look at the BEE format and other things when it comes to LNG anywhere around Africa, or even with projects, I'm sorry, it's going to fail. Because in South Africa, it's failed. It's failed. They loan you money and you give them an irrevocable waiver on the equity in the company, and guess what? You never pay that loan. So yes, you have an African name, an African face there, but never an African, never a real equity and African profit. I think we need to be very careful with that, and this is where skills come in. I wrote a book about this. One of the most successful LNG projects in the world, take out of Qatar, take out of Trinidad and Tobago, is the Nigerian LNG. Nigerians don't give themselves credit about that. Nigerian LNG continues to rack in profit year after year. Last year, $7 to $8 billion that they brought in last year. You have to look at that. If you're an African country looking at LNG and looking at how complex things with LNG are and the opportunities that are, look at an African country that has made it. Nigeria has done it very well. Equatorial Guinea is even doing good with its LNG, and build upon that and try to use that tried, true, and tested skills there. You talk about roadblocks. Some of the challenges that you face right now in the post-COVID narrative is that we have to start looking at true integration. We have to start looking at putting some skin in the game and really looking at using institutions like Tunde's institutions, Penina's institution, and even Paul's institution to really drive entrepreneurship. You are not going to have the states and politicians drive this. They have their role, they have their place, but where are we, what are we doing to see how we're going to drive entrepreneurship to shore this game up? A big part of what we continue to mix within this mix, we're talking about challenges, we got to be honest with ourselves. We got to take bold. This is time to go bold, people. Look at what is the role we're looking at women around Africa when we look at how we build a post-COVID narrative and opportunities. You're talking local content and all about, guys, create a real role and push the system to really have real empowerment of women to drive this industry. I'm not talking about soft skills. I'm talking about real engineering skills and creating that. That is really going to do that. But there is hope. There is hope when you look at new countries coming in with big gas projects like Senegal, that they're integrating all facets. Penina is here I've been to Uganda, I've done deals in Uganda, beautiful country, but let me tell you something. They have done a really great job at having women really lead their hydrocarbon sector. From UNOC to, I mean, she's at PAU, at PAU, the ministry, that you must give them credit, and I think we can learn from that. Mozambique can look towards Nigeria. Today, my good friend Simbe was doing a big webinar on Mozambique. I couldn't be there because I had to be here with you really lovely people. But I think though, when you really kind of look at where we're going, post-COVID, start looking at Senegal. If you come from an African producing state, you know, like I tell my Nigerian friends, learn some French, learn some foreign languages. It's really going to be helpful. But there's no reason why they're going to be doing massive LNG projects like what Paul says, billions, big billions, and you don't have Nigerian service companies, Nigerian producers. In Mozambique, look at Tanzania, 60 TCF of gas, nothing been done. Equatorial Guinea, more gas coming. Gabon, big gas discovery. So you're going to see on the service side a lot of opportunities because most of the Western nations don't even want to travel to Africa. So you need Africans to stand up, be counted, go to these places where you never thought you could go, set up service companies and compete. And there's something people don't understand. Africans can actually do it when they team up with their international partners, but you got to see how to push them to get in. I've seen it around Africa. I've worked with African companies around Africa, like I mentioned, Delta Africa. There is no reason why we cannot use this moment to leapfrog into the future and break bounds.
Wow. Thank you so much, NJ. Lots of questions coming in, and I think we are just starting this conversation. In all fairness, there's so much to talk about, and we need to start addressing the elephant in the room. We've swept so much under the carpet in Africa for so long, and it's bulging. So it's time for us to start looking at ourselves very honestly, looking at the industry, looking at the capacity, capabilities, and a way forward that encompasses true regional integration and transboundary solutions to what Africa is facing right now. Margaret, I would like to, we're running out of time, but there are some questions that have not been addressed neither in the presentations nor in the questions that I've asked. Would you like to pick at a few that we can quickly run through? I think our time is running out.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but I must say we have had some beautiful discussions here, and I think the discussion continues. So just to say, there is this question here for Penina. Is that what is the government of Uganda doing to get the diaspora involved and engaged in these projects? That question is from Victor Kauka. So what is the government of Uganda doing to get the diaspora involved and engaged in these projects, especially when it comes to building these technical muscles? I think you want to take that. I think someone also, you might want to add this one to somebody asked, what's the full meaning of RFP? Martin Chikwezi say, what's the meaning of RFP? So if you want to answer that quickly, then we can just pick a few more questions. Penina.
Okay, thank you so much, and we appreciate those questions. First of all, like I presented in my presentation, they are all efforts that are being made to enhance visibility of Ugandans, whether they're in the country or they're out of the country, as long as they have the competencies that are required. There are a number of efforts that are being put in place. Right now, we run the National Oil and Gas Talent Register. So the first step for that person that has asked that question is to quickly run to the Petroleum Authority website and make himself known by registering on the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, because we're using that talent register to know what kind of skills do we have, where are we lacking, so that we put in place appropriate plans and programs to address the skills gaps that we have. So one of the steps is to make sure we register whoever has the competencies that we are looking out for. But also we opportunities are advertised, and the first priority is really Ugandans. If there are no Ugandans, then we bring in an expatriate, but again, that expatriate has to have a national that is attached to that expatriate, and that's why I talked about a succession plans, so that at the end of the expatriate period, we have a Ugandan who can take over. So there are all opportunities for Ugandans wherever they are. They can make themselves known on the NOGTR, and the opportunities will be availed to them. The RFP is request for proposals. I think it is coming from someone who asked, how does someone get to bid for blocks in Uganda? And the response was that all you need to do right now, if you need more information. First of all, I could not share all the information on the bidding ground or on this forum. All you need to do is to go to our website, www.petroleum.go.ug. You'll be indicated to the procedure. First of all, I think there is a non-refundable fee of $20,000. After you've paid that, you've expressed your interest, then you'll get access to the request for proposals, or what I call the RFP. So it's just one of the steps in the bidding round. I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, very well. I have another question that I will pass to Mr. Tunde Adelana. So this person said, Olarewaju Daramola said, another person. So with respect to the marginal field round launched by DPR, please, is there any provision for NCI, as the Nigerian Content Initiative, financing of indigenous companies who may require same to finance part of the asset acquisition process? So talking about the marginal field bid rounds, do you have funding for indigenous companies looking with the NCI fund?
The bid rounds was announced on the 1st of June, just a few weeks back. The process has just been initiated. It's actually in our plans, like every other business initiative, any other business idea, that if you are a Nigerian, you have an opportunity to access the Nigerian Content Development Fund with the right proposal that is bankable, and we look at all the relevant, get the right support.
Thank you, Mr. Adelana. I just want to direct this question to Paul from Herodina Lucas. I got a bit lost on the explanation about the funds availed in Mozambique. How does it work? How do companies benefit from those funds? I, for instance, have a company set in Mozambique with local partners. How do I get access to this fund? Should we be interested? I don't know if you get the question, Paul.
Yeah, I also saw another question about the incubator in Uganda. So I'll answer that first. So the incubators are country specific. So an incubator in Uganda does Ugandan projects and Ugandan customers. The one in Mozambique does Mozambique and so on. So what I was explaining for Mozambique would also apply for Uganda. We're on a learning journey, as everybody is in Mozambique. So you have the FIDs are now only 12 months old in the first big project. And the real local content is going to start being available from about April next year onwards, as the construction of what's known as the MOF, the offloading facility, evolves. What I would suggest to the questioner is to make contact with our incubator, and through the organisers, I can pass on the details. And her company, once it's registered with the incubator, will have the best chance in Mozambique of exposure to potential local partners, to the training and skills development, such that the company can compete for work. As I mentioned, what we're seeing is a market development because of the nature of the economy at this stage and the sheer specialism of LNG, is that most Mozambican companies who are winning contracts are doing them in joint ventures with international partners. And essentially our financing approach would be contract-based around the contracts being in place, because you have to have a source of revenue in order to support the loan. But I'm happy to take the conversation further after the end of the webinar, if you can pass on the question as details to me and vice versa.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, yeah, we can do that. Regional integration post COVID-19, I think that question might be directed to NJ. Yeah, this Mrs. Rose Chukwuonye, she said she wants to see, I see functions depicted of what happens in Uganda and Nigeria. Please address the post-COVID-19 era. If you want to take that. That's so.
Can you repeat that again?
Okay, she's talking about regional integration post-COVID-19, and she said on this topic, she's here to hear what the panel has to say in kind of suggestion to solutions for the African oil and gas sector post-COVID-19. So could you please address that?
I think it's something which we've been working a lot at the African Energy Chamber. I think it is going to be really essential to have a post-COVID narrative for Africa. By the way, Tunde, I'm waiting for my Nigerian passport. I'm going to ask you for that. So don't tell me no. But I think you are going to see an Africa that is going to come out scarred. We have Western nations that could roll out billions of dollars to build out their industries. In Canada, what is in the United States, what is in Europe. You have an Africa where when Europe and America are having a recession, we are on a depression. We have seen the market collapse again with COVID. It has really exposed a lot of things. Like I said before, it might sound controversial, but we might have to close down some of our training institutions and pick 3, 4, or 5 and work with them. We might have to change how we engage in ourselves. We would have to really fast track that enabling environment where we say, well, one, we can't talk about regional integration when it doesn't start with people. Goods and services don't move alone, and then you can't even, if I get my Nigerian passport tomorrow, thanks to Tunde, I can't go around many countries without a visa. But then you have to see how we have to work. It's easier for someone to come from Europe and move around the continent than someone in the continent move around the continent. And Penina was right when she talked about hiring Ugandans and then moving with people, moving with expats. The truth of the matter is that the expats have not necessarily been Africans. The expats have always been European or American. But again, like I said in the past, you have a lot of Africans that have those given, trained, and developed and empowered by some of the same Western companies, whether it is service companies or international service companies, but we just don't prioritize that. So you need to look at that. And when you talk about, when you look about around with women. So the big question we have to ask ourselves is that, are we going to have be able to push policy makers to really do that? Has COVID-19 given us some kind of awakening to say, for once, people, let's look at these resources and let's really drive these resources. You want to talk about regional integration? Let's look at what we are doing with your African gas and how we're still dealing with the lack of power. Let's look at how you're looking at, Paul could tell you about Mozambique. When you do LNG agreements, all of these agreements are done with off-takers and everything at the same time. But I don't know, but I'll bet you 90% of the gas, the LNG, is going to go into Western countries, and probably a small fraction might stay into the country for domestic consumption. If you don't start building an African pipe stream where you can have real integration, when you start to, it's not just about people, but it's not talking about projects where you could curb the gas that Nigeria has been flaring, capture that gas and use some of it. Whether you look at LNG to really do power projects across the continent. and really be able to drive LNG around Africa and really be able to really boost that. Africans are going to really look at those opportunities and really look at that. If we don't do that, most of us who are in privileged positions today, we are going to be so ashamed by where we see ourselves, because we would be writing the same story which we have seen in the past and said, these guys didn't do anything. Our generation is failing a lot of the young people that are coming before us, and I hope COVID-19 is a wake-up call for us to start a new paradigm shift and define an Africa that some of us call home.
Okay, thank you so much, NJ. You are just quite spot on, and I'm sure the audience love you and they want to keep you here. But I think we're at a point where we have to round up. But if Madam Moderator will allow me to take this question, just this last question, talking about new projects from Kajel Gavik. I think this question is directed to Mr. Delana. He said, this goes in particular to Mr. Delana, but also affects all of us all over Africa. In order to enhance local content, every country needs new projects. And from what we see, there have been lack of new major projects, in particular offshore. Take Nigeria, the last major offshore project was Egina. That is almost 7 to 8 years ago. How can we get initiated? How can we initiate new development? How can we get initiated?
I just drop on this before I leave. When you look at offshore projects, and Great Tunde is here and Penina is here, we need to work on our environment. We need to work on enabling environment. It's not just Nigeria, and it's not just Gabon and Angola producing oil today. Nigeria is competing with a lot of other countries like new gas person, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Senegal, but also looking at big offshore projects, which might happen in places like Sao Tome, and let's not forget Ghana. So the arrogance and the cockiness that you've had in the past, we need to get rid of. We need to really start looking at those fiscal terms again. Because today, the big offshore projects, look at the top 5 big offshore projects that have happened over the last 2 years. They have not happened in Africa. You've seen Suriname, you're looking at Guyana, you're looking at the Gulf of Mexico. You're dealing with a new market environment where you're looking at climate change, unconventional oil in the United States. So your fiscal terms have to be really competitive for people to start saying, I am willing to put for Paul to say, I'm willing to put patient capital and let this capital work. And then maybe Tunde has to look at some of his restrictions and say, maybe it might make sense for me to be a little flexible and get more back. And yes, my beautiful sister Penina, we do not want the next discovery in Uganda to wait 10 years. I always tell my Ugandan friends, Jubilee in Ghana was discovered in 2007, the same time with Uganda. In 2010, 2011, the Ghanaians started producing. In 2020, Uganda is on the path to FID. That's 14 years late. We have to make sure that we cut the bureaucratic bottleneck on African companies and even international investors so that you can have these big offshore projects which require 6, 7, 10, and even $20 billion. So we have to look at the mirror, and we don't just have to be mirrored images and say, well, we just mirrored images. Mirrors are to correct what you see, not reflect what you see. So we need to have an internal reflection and change how we do business, because we're not competing between Rwanda and Maputo. We're competing between Port Harcourt and Houston and Aberdeen, and that is real. You might not like me saying this, but we need to get off our high horses as Africans and start competing. That's how you get big projects.
Thank you very much.
Margaret, they still need after so much coming from Dr. Ayuk. Doc, well done. I think you're spot on, and I think you've actually addressed every aspect of the question. I would just want to add what we are doing in the country to ensure that we continue to have a free flow of projects to support those capacities and capabilities that we build over time. As shown in my presentation, we've been able to achieve so much milestone within the 10 years of our existence as as NCDMB. We want to continue to sustain this. We don't want to lose those capabilities and skills that we built. And the only way we can do that is to ensure that we continue to have projects back to back, definitely. Like you said, we had the last project which was a junior. We understand that. We are very conscious of those challenges. And we're working vigorously. We're working seriously with government to ensure that we continue to have a free flow of projects. You're all aware of the recent FID and the signing on of the contracts for the NLNG 37. Following that, we're also looking at Bonga Southwest of Paro to see if that will come up as quickly as possible. We're also looking at reopening Zabazaba, which is a NAI project, as quickly as possible. This is the only way. Like you said, this is the only way we can actually continue to sustain those capabilities that we've actually struggled to achieve. And I think this also applies to every African countries. Like the discussion I had with Winifred sometimes. Other parts of Africa where you do not have as much, you have the capability, but there are other parts of Africa where there are activities. But they do not have the capabilities. So they can also, that's the essence of the integration. So we can also continue to sustain what we built over time. Otherwise, those efforts will go down the drain with time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very happy to hear you mention Bonga and Zabazaba. I think I have a decade of experience on that and I'm still waiting. So when that is ready, I am coming for roasted plantain. So
Nice.
do not let me down.
I want to say,
I should be getting two passports already.
Yes.
If you don't mind.
I'm an honorary citizen of Lagos, if you didn't know.
Okay.
Penina wanted to say something.
Just a very short one, just to correct maybe an impression that I don't know, Dr. Ayuchi could have created. Without sounding defensive, I know he talked about bureaucracy and creating a conducive investment climate so that projects can be launched and so on. And he tried to compare Uganda and Ghana. Well, we hear you loud and clear, but I think you're comparing apples and, I don't know, apples and what?
Bananas.
Apples and bananas, yes. Apples and bananas. In all fairness, first of all, I think we have different environments and backgrounds. Uganda is landlocked. We had so many issues that we needed to sort out before going into development and so on. When we discovered we first needed to put our house in order, we didn't have the institutional or regulatory framework. We had to put that in place. We are landlocked. We had to find out what kind of commercialization plan can we have. When we agreed on a refinery and a pipeline, we now had to engage on the route. Do we go through Kenya? Do we go through Tanzania? Do we go through Sudan? And so on. And that was also not easy, given that we are not really fully integrated as a community. If we had been fully integrated in terms of development strategy and so on, like I said at the beginning, maybe the selection of the route wouldn't have taken that long. We now chose the route. You know what it takes to conclude these pipeline agreements, the IGA, the HGAs, and so on. So in all fairness, really, I think we have tried to create a conducive environment for the projects in Uganda, and soon, once the commercial issues are sorted, we should be able to see FID. Thank you.
So I think Margaret gets to have, Penina gets to have the last word. Margaret, would you like to wrap up the session? From my part, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a great opportunity to have these discussions. And as I said earlier, I think this is a conversation that needs to continue at different levels, and we need to start tackling these issues. Margaret?
Well, I totally want to say thank you to all the panelists for being here, and we have totally enjoyed all you have said. And obviously from the questions we have, we are not done yet about this. We still have to talk more about this. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, NJ. Thank you, Penina. Thank you, Mr. Delana. Thank you for making the session as engaging as possible and for bringing in your best to the table. I'm turning it over to Jerome to draw the curtain on it, and we'll just end it here.
And the conversation doesn't stop in here. There was a conversation I was having with Dr. NJ recently, and we are looking at getting a document out of this. Yes, these conversations are good, but we need some very strong backings. So Dr. NJ and Majorwaves, his organization and our organization as well, we're working with some statutory bodies to take it to the next level. Okay, so we'll be working with the board as well to make this happen. So once again, I want to say thanks to everybody for being part of this. Our panelists have been fantastic. Also our audience attendees, thank you for this, and we look forward to doing this more and more. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Penina.
Yes, bye.
Bye-bye.